Hello, this is video number 9 in Quarantine History 2020. Um, so this is going to be kind of a combination of leading up to World War II and then Great Depression. And today I am using scans from this handy dandy little book, Everything You Need to Know About World History. And again, I really recommend that you could get this book for your student. It doesn't matter really what grade they're in. They have them for U.S. history, and then they have for science and English. And I've actually purchased the English one and the U.S. history for my son, who is a junior, finishing out junior this year, and it really has helped him. They're great little resources books. So we're going to kind of zoom through this today, and I'm going to, you've got this screen there where it shows it, and I'm going to be reading from here just because I don't have my glasses on today while I'm doing this, and I'm also kind of playing around with a new concept on the video here. Okay, so the Great Depression, and I kind of led into this the other day when we talked about how the German economy was. And so this is just going to kind of talk about the worldwide depression. Okay, so the war after World War One, the countries were pretty much broke, and I think you can see that as it was a 4-year war. They had to pay for food, they had to pay for ammunition, they had to pay for weapons, they had to pay the men, and so there's not a lot of money left over to kind of help build their economy back or to fix the damage that the war did, which is why that they wanted Germany to pay all the reparations that they did or that they expected. All right, so the countries were pretty broke, and then by the 1920s, the world economy had slowed down, wages were down, sales were down, and the market for farm goods wasn't doing well. And we talked about that the other day, that there was an overproduction of wheat. Okay. All right, so causes of the Great Depression. Britain and France had a huge debt to pay to the United States. And the United States, when we came into the war, we kind of came in saying, well, we're not coming in for free. I mean, you are expecting us to come in and kind of help you out. We're going to, and not only that, we had supplied them with food and ammunition and other supplies before we got into the war. So Britain and France wanted Germany to pay the U.S. through the reparations that Germany owed Britain and France. But as we talked about in the last video, Germany was out of cash and could only pay reparations by borrowing money from the U.S. to give to Britain and France. So this cycle of borrowing and lending was a problem. And I mean, if you've ever had any type of dealings with like a payday loan, think of it like that. You may borrow $200 from a payday loan place. And when you go and pay like your minimum, I mean, you still got that other money to pay. You still have that 200. You're only paying, the $50 interest. And, after a couple of months, you could have already paid that off, but it's just a complete cycle. So it's kind of like that. All right, so World War I left the U.S. in a much better shape. The government had needed war supplies, and this did create jobs. So we were able to kind of come out of it better than a lot of countries because we had the resources, and then we also had the ability to create these items that the other countries needed. All right, and so that created jobs. So during the 1920s, Americans started investing in the stock market. They began making purchases on credit. Now, today, credit is a huge thing. Back then, it wasn't. Today, pretty much anybody can go and start building up credit and buying things on credit. And then you can get in trouble with credit. And that's what's going to happen here also. They're going to get into some trouble with credit. The export market was down. Because Europeans didn't have money for American goods. When Europeans had trouble paying their debt, American banks crumbled. On October 29th, 1929, the American stock market crashed and severe unemployment followed. The economic crisis was called the Great Depression. Now, right over here on the screen right here It says many Americans ran to get money out of their banks when the stock market crashed. The banks told them sorry, but they didn't have the money. President Franklin Roosevelt made laws to ensure protections of citizens' monies in banks after that. And we talked a little bit about that in the last video if you need to go back and see it. And then I think it'll be in this section. If not, I'll go ahead and talk about it real quick. What he did is he created something called FDIC. And in the last video, that's what I said, is that if you had money in the bank today, and depending on how much it is, you can go and get it. Your money is guaranteed up to like $250,000, and it's different depending on if it's a joint account, who's the head person in the joint account, if you have CDs. So there's different levels of money. So you're guaranteed more than $250,000 depending on how your accounts are set up, but at the minimum, you are guaranteed up to $250,000. So if something like this ever happened again, you would be fine. Now, things have happened since then. We had the savings and loans situation in the 90s, and that's kind of moved from savings and loans to credit unions. Now, credit unions are not insured by FDIC, but they do have their own insurance similar to FDIC. So your money is just as safe there as it is in a regular bank. All right, so Roosevelt will become the president right after the Great Depression starts. And he will start some and implement some programs that he calls the New Deal. And it is to help the economic downturn during this time. He will create the the Federal Emergency Relief Administration to help the unemployed, the AAA, Agricultural Adjustment Administration, which will help the farmers, and the Public Works Administration. This will create new jobs building bridges, post offices, and airports. Now, he also, in our area, which is Florence, Alabama, he establishes something called the TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority. And at this point, and this is kind of local history for those of you who are wanting local history, we had built a dam here in Florence called Wilson Dam under Woodrow Wilson's administration during World War One. And so, like, nobody really, I guess, owned it. And Henry Ford of the Ford had wanted to buy the dam, and he wanted also to buy a lot of land in an area called Muscle Shoals right across the river from Florence. And as a matter of fact, he went as far as to start organizing some neighborhoods over there. Well, Franklin D. Roosevelt said no, that he could not buy it. And so then he established it, I cannot talk today. He established something called TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, that goes all up and down the Tennessee River, obviously. It created jobs, and it helped with electricity and power and other things. Okay. All right. So he also went into a second New Deal, which created unemployment insurance and Social Security. He improved the banking system and expanded rights for labor unions. Okay. But now this is not going to solve all the problems. Almost 11 million Americans will remain unemployed during this time period. So not great, but it is getting a little bit better. All right, so depression around the world. To get back on its feet, Great Britain used traditionally conservative policies of balancing budgets, I can't talk today, and imposing protective tariffs. But here's the thing. Great Britain already had an established government. They were already strong. But other European countries were less fortunate in this. Okay, so because you've got to remember, we have been through literally almost 100 years, well, over 100 years of unrest in Europe, starting with Napoleon. Everything goes back to Napoleon. And he created new borders. And then the Concert of Europe created new borders. And then this created World War One. So we have countries that for almost 100 years have not had stable governments. And the governments they did have, like Germany, collapsed. And there was no one there. They went from having a monarchy to having no government whatsoever that had any type of um, value, that had any type of structure, that had any type of strength. And so this is where all of these countries that are struggling are going to allow these totalitarian leaders to come in, like Adolf Hitler. In Germany, Adolf Hitler will come to power as leader of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or the Nazis. Hitler called for a crusade against communists and Jews, whom he blamed for Germany's defeat in World War I. Germans knew that one way to get out of debt was to attack the countries they owed money to. And so this is going to start World War II. All right, so quickly, we're going to just go into political shifts after the war, and then I'm going to do just a whole nother one about Hitler's rise and what he is upset about. Okay, so after World War One, some countries changed their form of leadership to totalitarianism. In totalitarian states, the government controls every part of a citizen's life: political, social, economic, intellectual, and cultural. They often use mass propaganda techniques to take over their people. This is something interesting every year I have my students do. I have them do propaganda posters. And we have to look at propaganda posters and um, how that they influenced society at that time. And if you ever really want to do that, Google propaganda posters during World War One and World War II. It's really, really interesting. Okay, so in 1922, Russia will change their name to the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics of the USSR. Lenin um, will have passed away, and we now have Stalin. He was going to take control, and Stalin was part of his program before that. Um, we have a lot of situations, and I'm not just going to go into it big time because it gets into a lot more detail than really we have time for. But this is where Stalin will really take a firmer grip on the USSR than Lenin did. This will start his total control of people, wages, jobs, living conditions, and everything. Okay. He also will start a program where he kills anyone who resists him, or he will banish them to labor camps in Siberia. So it's tough for me to say that any leader during this time period was a good leader. I really do feel like Lenin was not as bad as Stalin. Stalin, uh, well, Stalin just wasn't good, a good leader. Again, Lenin, Stalin, two evils. But again, I think Lenin was not quite as bad as Stalin. We're going to have a situation where we see Japan coming into a lot of more power. And this is one of the questions that always asked every year: why did Japan bomb Pearl Harbor? Well, it had to do with them wanting to expand and become a world power. It had to do with them going into Manchuria, and it had them going into China. And, the United States had told them, you need to stop this. And they really didn't like United States and other countries telling them that. But we'll get into that on another video also. We'll see fascism in Italy start with Benito Mussolini. And he will become Hitler's little puppet. Anything Hitler tells him to do, he'll do because he wants to be part of the big power. He'll get his own later too. So here's just a totalitarian expansionism recap and look ahead. We have Japan annexes Korea in 1910. 1922, the USSR is formed. 1931, Japan invades Manchuria. In 1937, Japan invades China, where it perpetuates the Nanjing Massacre. In 1935, Italy conquers Ethiopia and leaves the League of Nations. In 1939, Italy conquers Albania. This is going to be the most important thing, and this is kind of where we'll pick up on the German and Hitler video. Germany annexed a country called Rhineland, or an area called Rhineland. And this was an area that the Treaty of Versailles had declared a neutral buffer zone. Now, what that was is this was an area between Germany and France that France wanted to keep Germany from just coming in and taking over them anytime they wanted to. And like France could defend it, but Germany was not allowed to put any type of weapons there. And this was agreed for in the Treaty of Versailles. Well, Hitler, and again, I've got a whole other video we'll do just on Hitler. Hitler said, no, not going to do that. We are going to go in there because it's got a lot of coal. It can help us with our economy. And we're going to take that back over because that was our land. This is going to be the beginning of the end leading to World War II. This is where the prime minister for Britain Neville Chamberlain, will kind of concede when he should have stood strong. But again, we'll talk about that. This has been a really quick video. Sorry for that. I kind of zoomed through it. But I did want to talk real quickly about just the Great Depression and then the rise of the totalitarian leaders. I'll kind of probably highlight each one of those separately, but definitely we'll do Hitler in a bigger video. Have a good day. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you.